So thank you, Gemma. Over to you.
Oh. Hello, everyone. Can I get some thumbs up that you can see that? Yeah, brilliant. Hi, my name's Gemma Sherwood, so welcome to today's session. I'm a geotechnical manager at EDF Energy, and I predominantly work at Hinkley Point C, which is a new nuclear build in Somerset, but I'm also working on the Sizewell C project, which is the next new nuclear build project in Suffolk. So as it says there, I've got a undergraduate MSci in geology from the University of Bristol, and then I went on to do a part-time master's in geotechnical engineering at Birmingham. So before I went to university and did my degree in geology, my experience, my perception of geology was zilch. I did not have a clue about geology. I didn't even know what geology was. And it wasn't until one of my my teachers made a very flippant comment. She just mentioned it really like casually. She was just like, well, if you love physical geography so much, Gemma, why don't you go and do geology at university? And it wasn't until I started researching geology and I realized how much I loved all of the modules that were being offered at the universities, how much that really closely related to what I loved about physical geography. I couldn't stand human geography. So doing a geography degree was out for me. And it just suited me perfectly. Even at university, I thought a main career path for a geologist or a geoscientist was oil and gas or mining. Now, it's fair to say that a lot of people who I graduated with at university did go on to mining, particularly in Australia, but it's just so not true that that's the stereotype for a geologist. Like our career paths are so varied and so different. So, for example, I work mostly in nuclear energy. It's a bit of a niche area in geoscience because we don't build that many nuclear power stations. But I've actually worked on 3 new nuclear power stations. But as part of that, I work a lot in ground engineering and geotechnical engineering. And these are very broad subjects. So I end up working on a lot of other things because a lot of the disciplines cross over. For example, I work in roads and transports because you need good road system to get all your stuff to your new construction site. All of the material that we take out the ground, we have to reuse it because we don't want to just send it to landfill. So I work on engineering, reuse of engineered material, and also, for example, monitoring of the construction activities that we're doing. So I wouldn't say that these interest me the most, but it's definitely like the career path that I've gone down. But that being said, I get involved in many different areas and specialisms. And as I said, a lot of these disciplines cross over. For example, I've got friends that work in seismic analysis, which I provide a lot of the data for, wind farm design and wind farm construction, deep underground storage for nuclear waste. There are so many areas. And the truth of it is we just don't have enough geoscientists in the UK and abroad to fill the demand. So as I said, I'm a geotechnical manager, so I manage a team of geoscientists and geologists at Hinkley Point C. And I've recently been designing a multi-million-pound technical specification. So basically how you're going to construct a nuclear power station. And that's based on all my lessons learned from Hinkley Point. So I do a lot of site supervision, and because we're trying to construct something in that, whereas the geology might not like that, what we're trying to construct, we do get a lot of challenges on site. But the thing I like best about my career and my jobs is that there is a huge amount of variety, and there is a huge amount of opportunity to travel and field work. So I've just come back from 2-year secondment in France. I've also traveled all around the country working on different projects. So what helped me get to where I am and what I wish I'd known? Summer work experience was a must-have for me. So you don't know if you're going to like something if you don't try it. And the thing is, summer work experience isn't always advertised. So I've got 3 3 summer work experiences I did while I did my undergraduate degree, and none of them were advertised. I sent out my CV and I sent out emails requesting my summer work experience. And as a result, I got to work for a month in Mexico on a live active volcano, which was absolutely fantastic. And at the beginning of my undergraduate degree, I really, really love volcanoes. I thought that was what I wanted to do. But actually, even though I absolutely loved my summer work experience, I realized that it wasn't actually something I wanted to do as a career. I also worked in the University of Bristol laboratory, helping postdoc and PhD students like prepare their samples and for their projects. And by the end of that, I think I did 2 months. I realized it really wasn't for me. And then I did a couple of weeks working for a small ground investigation contractor called Structural Soils in Bristol. And this actually turned out to be my first job. Once again, the job wasn't advertised, the work experience wasn't advertised. I just took it upon myself to ask them. So one of my greatest regrets is at university, I turned down an opportunity to work for a year abroad in North America, Europe, or New Zealand. I actually had a place at a University of Otago in New Zealand, and I turned it down, and I still don't know why. And it was one of the biggest things I ever regret. So my advice is don't be afraid to travel across the UK or abroad for universities or for a new job. You will adapt, you'll fit in, you'll make new friends, and you will love it. Other tips and things I wish I'd known is chemistry and maths are scary, but they don't have to be. I'm not brilliant at maths, but it's still something that I struggle with. But the earlier that you get on it and you learn, the better it will be. And it doesn't have to be scary, basically. And if you enjoy things like computer modeling and programming, we need you for geoscience. I do so much computer modeling now, but it wasn't necessarily taught at A level, and it was only starting to become a bit bigger at university level. So if you love programming, it will all come in useful. And just any advice is any training that you're offered, or any experiences that you're offered, I take them. It will create more opportunities. For example, I had to go and do some training when I was they sunk you in a in a helicopter in a swimming pool and turned you around and you had to escape. But now it means I can fly out to oil fields. I can drive speedboats because I needed to drive speedboats to get to do offshore ground investigations. I can also drive MEEPs, which are those mobile platforms you see the electricity guys working on. But that's for slope inspections. It's all really, really useful. And also get involved with STEM and become a STEM ambassador. It's incredibly fulfilling and spreading news about geoscience. And also join the Geological Society. You can join as a student member. I think it's £15 a year. Don't quote me on that. But if you become a member, you can get more involved in your regional group, attend talks, most of which are now on Zoom. We have the Geological Society Schools Competition. And when you sort of start getting into career, you've got the Early Careers Award. So these are fantastic areas to join the geoscience community. So really, really quickly, my timeline. I left school with 3 A levels in geography, biology, and chemistry. So I got AAB, and this is back in the good old days. We didn't have A stars and A stars. But my teachers never predicted me that. They refused to predict me what I knew I could get. So they predicted me BBC. And that actually did impact what I could apply for at university, but I overcame it. And I actually went to the best universities in the country for geoscience. I then did 2 years as a ground investigation contractor in Structural Soils Limited, and it was an absolutely fantastic experience, one of the best things I've ever did. I then went to become to a consultancy, and I did that for 6 years, and now I'm the client. So each step has it's been a bit more varied, a bit different. And yeah, I spent, as I said, the last 2 years in France. I moved my family over, working on the Sizewell C project. And what does the future hold, and what my hopes going forward? Well, for me, nuclear power is very important for the future of UK energy security. I'm not going to say it's necessarily long-term solution, but I definitely believe it's the intermediate. So we're already working on Sizewell C, as I said, which is the next new nuclear power station. But there are so many different areas that this is expanding. So small modular reactors, you might have heard of those. But it's all, as I said earlier, all the disciplines are all interlinked. So this is my immediate future, but it's not necessarily something that I could continue on if I decide to do something different, just because there are so many areas that you can go into in geoscience, and that keeps my career very varied and keeps me very interested. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Gemma. That was a really good presentation. And thank you for sharing so much, and kind of your personal regrets of missing out on a year in this, at university abroad, things like that. That's really interesting to hear, but lots of highlights there too. So we've got 4 other speaker presentations. So next up is Kartikeya.
Thank you. I'm just going to share my screen now.
Perfect.
Great. Perfect. I think it's working. Thank you, everyone. So first off, I just want to say how glad I am to come here and to interact with all of you. Kind of reminds me of 10 years back when I was attending similar sessions, meeting people, and trying to figure out what I want to do ahead. So just a quick introduction. My name is Kartikeya. I am a planetary scientist and a geologist. I completed my master's back in 2016, and now I'm doing my PhD. Hopefully before the end of this year, I'll complete it, fingers crossed. What I work on is actually a comparison between 2 different planetary bodies. So I work on some Earth-based data, some Mars-based observations, and try to combine and understand how water, predominantly water, shaped the surface of Mars in the past and how it continues to change the surface of Earth in the present. So in terms of my journey through geology, I'll just try to show you my career timeline and what I did and how I got to where I was. And hopefully that kind of gives you an idea of really the breadth of this subject. So I started way back. So back in 2011, I completed my A-levels in India with physics, chemistry, and mathematics. At that time, I was actually pretty certain that I wanted to go join the army, and I did not want to do anything related to geology. As Gemma has said, the perception about geology was that either it is just oil or even worse, it's just geography. But really, there is so much more to geology. And the event that kind of changed everything for me was in 2011, the NASA Curiosity rover was launched from Earth. And I remember I came across an article through the NASA website where people were more interested in the physics, the orbital mechanics of how it was going to go there and land. And instead, what actually interested me was how they selected the place to land. And that's where I realized that the role that geology played in not just here, but on Earth and on other planets in terms of deciding what we find in terms of life on other planets. So that kind of got me interested into studying geology. I did not really have an option to study planetary geology, and at that time I was really not sure I wanted to do that. So I went and did a geology degree, and most of it also actually was quite interesting because I liked being outdoors. I did not like being in a very confined classroom settings, and that kind of helped me because I could go out into the field. So for example, in the middle image here, you can see the crumbled up rocks behind me, and I'm trying to take notes. It was also kind of like an adventure because you go out there with friends, and some locations you can't even get to them, so you have to take a boat to get to them. So the adventure of geology also kind of drew me in. And I mean, I was pretty sure by the end of my first year that, yeah, this is probably what I meant to do. So before I got to where I was really confused what my interests in geology were. And I did a period of work and research abroad where I went to Ohio State University. I worked on the changes in Antarctic ice sheets, trying to understand how they were changing in the past and how we could use that information to understand what was happening in the present day. So kind of feed into the whole climate debate, for example. But I was sort of more interested into what was happening directly on the surface, and that's how really I found my specialized interest, which was to work on surface processes. And that's how I landed here, and I decided to do a PhD after spending about a year in industry working on floods, so another thing which was just related to surface and water. So, and as I said earlier, I work on like 2 different planets. So my research was just going out into the field, for example, here in Spain, and try to collect data and then try to feed that information to try to model what was happening on Mars, for example, at this location in GSL crater, where NASA's Perseverance rover is also collecting data and hopefully bringing back samples to Earth. So this is sort of my current role now. It's about 50% of the time. This is lab work where I sit in the lab, look at data, do some mapping. I also look at some of the present day surface processes, like you see in the middle of how the rivers are changing over time and what are the processes involved in that change. And then we also go to some of these sites of ancient rivers where where there are rocks, and we do measurements. We also do, some of them would be to go by, collect data by drones and GPS. So that's kind of like my, not essentially day-to-day, but kind of like a yearly period. In the summer months, I'm out in the field collecting data, sometimes in very exotic locations in South Wales, Scotland, or Spain, and other time I'm in the lab collecting data. Just quickly, a lot of people will tell you about the information in geology. Kind of what helped me was having the information from the NASA website, kind of understand what were the careers. I also had the opportunity to do summer internships, especially abroad, because they kind of give you a much broader view of different aspects of geology. I would also encourage people to really visit museums, and a lot of universities do outreach activities for A-levels and GCSEs, and even GeoSoc does it. Earlier last year, they did a special Martian Science Career event. So these kind of events would be really helpful in trying to understand what really interests you. For future, there are exciting areas of research as well as jobs in planetary geology. There are rovers from ESA, Rosalind Franklin, that will go later in the decade. We have Curiosity and Perseverance, so you can work in these agencies. There are missions to icy moon, Venus, and asteroids. So really, in planetary geologies, there is a lot of different varieties you can do. And good thing is, if you do comparison to Earth like I do, you also have avenues to working in geology open. So that's all about me. I'm really looking forward to interacting with you. Also, please feel free to send me any questions or any queries on Twitter or at my email. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kartikeya. That was a really interesting presentation, and I'm glad that you're here with us today, presenting about planetary rather than in the army. So it shows people can have very different ideas and suddenly go in one way or another. So thank you. Next we have Katie, who will be presenting. So see you there, Katie. Are you ready?
I think so. Give me 2 seconds and I'll share my screen.
Super.
Okay, great. Yeah, so thanks very much everyone for joining. I'm looking forward to sharing my story with you. It's probably a bit of a curveball talk compared to the other geologists here. So yeah, my name's Katie Chapman. I'm a freelance assistant producer working in TV. So I work mostly in factual TV. So that encompasses like everything from science, history, arts, religion, travel logs, all those sort of things. Pretty much exclusively on BBC programmes, maybe 90% of the time. But my background is all geology. So I did my undergrad degree at Leeds in geological sciences, and then went on to do my master's at Bristol in volcanology. And then a bit further down the line, went on to do a PhD. And it was while I was doing my PhD that I dabbled a little bit in TV, stopped my PhD and went across to TV. So the rest is history. But from the very beginning, so my A-levels were maths, chemistry and geology. I think at the time, I knew that I didn't want to do a standalone degree in maths or chemistry. And so I've always liked being outside and traveling. My dad's a civil engineer, so he's been in the geology world slightly, and I think he suggested to me that that would be a good route to go down. So you could kind of say that I fell into it. I think I was lucky that my school did geology at sixth form. So I kind of knew the basics, but didn't know where I was going to go with it. I just knew that it was something that I was going to enjoy. So I think when I'm chatting to like my TV colleagues and I say this is my background, I'm actually a geologist, those are my degrees, they're a bit like, well, that's, you know, a bit of a tangent to come from geology into TV, but actually thinking about it, there are a lot of transferable skills in TV I've like collected from my experience in geology. So like these pictures all at the bottom are all from my geology fieldwork conference days. And pretty much all of these things I've transferred into TV in some way or another. So like the bottom right-hand picture is taking logs through a volcanic section, and being like super meticulous with those types of things is exactly the skills that you need when you're doing like research for TV. Fieldwork, 100%. Like I really enjoyed all the fieldwork in geology, and there's a parallel there with going on location and doing filming in TV, the long days and the preparation that you need, thinking ahead about logistics, like whether you're going to be like in the middle of nowhere with no electricity and how you're going to get there. So all these things like I've learned through my background in geology and I've taken into TV with me. And so I think before I did like my work experience, I had no idea that like being a researcher was even a thing in TV. And so like this middle section with the red underlines is the kind of hierarchy that you're getting in factual TV. It does differ slightly in other genres. So you do get things like office runners, but then the core group is like you'll have a researcher, an assistant producer, which is what I do, a producer director. They tend to link together, so it's just like one role. If it's a multiple episode, producers and executive producers ahead of that. But what does that mean in terms of like my role? Well, essentially researchers and assistant producers bring everything together for a TV episode. So I guess, say if you were doing a project or a program on like climate change, we'd all get together and think about the most recent developments in climate change. You go out, you research who the best people are to talk to, set up calls with them. So all the academics and experts in those topics. It's all about thinking about how you communicate that science to the audience. So it's very different if you're doing like a children's program compared to like an Horizon at 9 o'clock. So you're constantly thinking about the best ways to do that, whether it's simple interviews or graphics, experiments. My role then includes setting up the locations, so sourcing those locations, sourcing the props, thinking about how you're going to get there, writing the scripts, going on location, making sure everything runs smoothly, making sure that what they're saying from all your research that you've done is actually true. And then you kind of occasionally pull together archives, so all those like nice shots that you see on TV of like city skylines or like rolling landscapes, or like even like generic cell pictures. They're all from like archive sources online. Fact checking the scripts, again, like being super meticulous with your research. Channels, part of the deliverables, the channel needs to make sure that everything what you've done is true. So you're fact checking the scripts and putting all the sources in, and then handing it all into the edit where the kind of story comes together. So that's what I will do throughout the course of a contract on a program. What I do in images, like kind of with the geology side of things, you get to go and travel to places that like you never would normally do, which I think is incredible. So like filming out in the Outer Hebrides, or like, yeah, going into surgeries. That was for a medical program. There's a lot of like labs and exercise shoots, dairy farms, and then like, yeah, going into the edit as well. And that's kind of really nice when you see everything pulled together and the story kind of takes shape, which is really lovely. And so very quickly, like my career path is a bit all over the place, but essentially I did my undergraduate degree at Leeds. I took a year out, and during that year, I had a placement with some volcanologists in South America, which is amazing. Went to do my master's at the University of Bristol. Again, like the opportunities there were like incredible, going back out to Central America. I then dabbled in the oil and gas industry for a year, which is, again, like I think people have alluded to, that's sometimes where you think you're going to end up. That wasn't for me, although it was super interesting. So I went into renewables in the civil service for a year, then decided that I wanted to go back and do my PhD. And as I say, it was during that time where I kind of realized that science communication was actually where my heart lay, and I just enjoyed that side of it. So ended up doing a placement at the BBC. And kind of over that next year and a half, I realized that the PhD wasn't quite what I wanted to do, but TV was something that I was really interested in. So I stopped the PhD, and a couple of months later, I got my first like proper TV job. And then sort of 4 or 5 years down the line, I'm now an assistant producer and just been nominated for a couple of Scottish BAFTAs and Royal Television Society Awards. So hopefully in the next couple of months, we should know whether we won those or not. So that's really exciting. Yeah, and like, what can you do? I think if you're interested in doing geology or a geoscience degree, I think first and foremost, do what you enjoy. So do that and just see what comes your way while you're doing your degree. But if it's science communication that you start to feel like you really enjoy, all of these things you can do on the side while you're at university. So definitely becoming a STEM ambassador. I think the other talks have like said that that's a great thing to do. It definitely is. Joining your student radio, you can be able to come like a bit more familiar with sound and how that equipment works, taking videos and photos, trying to think about how stories and narratives come together. Birthday course, I think, hands down, whatever you're doing, whether a geologist or not, if you're out on location, having those skills is brilliant. And then networking as well, like having it is a little bit of who you know, and starting to get your CV out and talking to people. So all of these things you can do alongside your degree. But yeah, just definitely do what you enjoy most of all, and then I would say like see what comes your way. So thank you. Yeah, that's my my background. As I say, a bit of a like sideline into TV, but I'm enjoying what I do, but I wouldn't be here if I hadn't done all my geosciences beforehand. So thank you.
Thanks, Katie. That is a fascinating kind of career path, from oil and gas to renewables, civil service work, and onto TV. And I'm relieved that someone who is a scientist revises scripts and so on, and creates scripts for TV. So good luck with your BAFTA. And next up we have Malika. So Malika, are you ready?
Yeah, let me share my screen. Here you go. Yeah, so I'll just go over who I am, what I thought geology was and what it actually is, where I am with my career, because I'm very early on. I've only been in the industry for 2 years, and the whole time has been with Mark McDonald, and a few tips that I feel like I could give that I've had in the past like 2 to 3 years. Yeah, so my name is Malika. I'm a graduate. I'm currently in my 3rd year of the graduate scheme, so my final year. I did a degree in environmental geoscience at Cardiff, and yeah. So what is geology? So that's a quick picture of me out in the field with a colleague. Before university, I thought geology was just basically about rocks. I didn't really know much about it. They didn't really offer geology for A level, so I went for geography instead. I preferred the physical side, so I decided to do something more science-based, because I did geography, biology and maths, and then I did a bit of chemistry for AS as well. I mainly work in hydrology and hydrogeology, but I thought mainly it was engineering and design and like geotech for geology. But there's so many things you can go into. A route that I found was contaminated land when I was doing my degree. So that was something that I found was really interesting. During my career, so during university, I thought contaminated land was the path I wanted to go down. I did a summer internship between my second and third year at university, and I thought, right, I was pretty set on contaminated land, but when you come to work, you're given a range of different things to do. I did some environmental impact assessment. I did some consenting. I did some coordination, and I found out that actually coordination was the path that I actually preferred. I liked managing people. I liked managing the information, data, working with a team. And I found that was probably the better pathway for me than contaminated land. We also do a lot of voluntary work as well. So the picture to the right is of the River Wye, and we're hoping to remediate it. So that's basically to get rid of the pollution that's been put in there from farming and loads of different other sources, and hopefully trying to clear it up so more people can use it for canoeing and things like that. So my timeline, I did my A-levels, so that was geography, maths, chemistry, and biology. I was actually going to drop geography, but decided I wasn't great at chemistry, so I decided geography was more for me. Decided to carry on with geography, and I'm glad I did, because that's the route I ended up going down. When I was choosing my A-levels, actually, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I just chose subjects that I enjoyed, and I thought that I would do best at. And then I just Googled what I could do with the subjects that I loved. And geoscience was one of the ones that came up. And because it was more of the science side of geography, that's what pulled me towards it, because it links my biology in with it as well. See if consulting was like kind of a thing that I wanted to do, if the environment was something that I was interested in. I did a summer, just a couple of weeks at Arup. I actually ended up really enjoying it. So I decided, yeah, I want to do a degree in geoscience. I applied for their MESci Environmental Geoscience degree, but when I came to Mott MacDonald for my summer internship, they said that I didn't need to do a master's. They said that they were willing to add me onto the grad scheme the year after if I just wanted to drop down to a BSc. So that's what I decided to do. I thought that I thought that doing a master's was just for the sake of getting a job. For me, I wasn't particularly interested in being at university for any much longer. Most people said do a master's because you're more likely to get a job out of that. So I decided to drop down to a BSc, and it gives me opportunity to do a master's later on once I've decided which route I want to go down and if I want to specialize in a specific area, which will be more useful for me in the future. I graduated. I had my official ceremony just literally in the previous summer. So yeah. So Mott MacDonald, there's loads of offices around the UK, which is great because you get to travel around the UK. And you can even travel around the world as well. We have work experience actually for GCSE and A-level students. And with any background as well. So if you come from a lower income family, we're connected with the Social Mobility Foundation. So it's definitely something to check out, to get a week in a professional setting, and you get to spend half a day with all the different teams. So you can see whether you like ecology, geotech, environment, even engineering, so bridges, rail, all the different ones. And we've put together little projects all around Harry Potter, which is great. Yeah, so my typical day is I prepare for meetings in the morning, have a little coffee break, catch up with some colleagues, have some meetings just before lunch, have a look at what I need to do, send out a table with all the actions from it, have my lunch, and then I work on the reports, mainly from like the meetings and feedback. And then we get given fruit, and as soon as the fruit comes, everyone runs. So yeah, it's definitely a thing to go grab. And then I work on reports for the remaining of the day. Yeah, so my top 3 tips is join a professional institution, just because you can join some webinars, you can see whether the kind of things interest you, because there's such a different range of things. Like, for example, like hydrology, you can have some in geotech, you can have some contaminated land, like some of them aren't even too technical. I think Geological Society did one on planets recently, and I thought that was really interesting. Do a year in industry. That is so helpful. It gives you an insight on what your life will be like when you graduate and get a job. I think it's really good to kind of get a feel for what you would be doing in the future. And even if it's for you, I think it's really helpful to find out something's not for you as well. So if you decide, I don't like that route, that's just as valuable as knowing if that's the route you want to go down. And go out your comfort zone. You should go out and do things that you probably wouldn't like to do. So I was scared going into like an industry and doing an internship, because I'd never worked in a professional setting before. But I'm so grateful I did. I did spent 2 months with Mott MacDonald, because it gives you an insight to a world that you've not seen before, and you kind of get to know whether that's the kind of thing you want to do. I was on site a lot. I enjoyed the being on site and being in the office, finding the balance that's right for you. And we also, I've gone out my comfort zone recently as well by organising a beach clean. That was, yeah, that was a fun thing to do, to get loads of different people to do something different and to give back. In the future, I've decided to go down the water route, because I've been working more on consenting and H1 risk assessments, which is having a look at pollution in groundwater. So that's something that I think I want to do. I'm actually thinking about maybe doing a master's in hydrology as well, to see if that'll help me. And then slowly going down to get chartered. So when you're in consulting, the main route after 5 years, your aim is to become chartered. I'm sure some people on this on the panel are chartered as well, but it just shows that you have a certain set of skills. Yeah, so that's my aim. Thanks for listening. Hope that helped.
Thank you, Malika. That was great, and so interesting. You discussing about how university placements helped you kind of get in your position that you're in now, and you know, put pause on further study for now. So it just shows that it's not always critical, and work experience is so useful. So last but not least is Ed Hendon. So Ed, are you ready?
Ready and raring, yeah. Thank you. Just share that. You got my screen? Let's hide that.
Yeah, I have.
Great. Yeah, so a real privilege to be able to share a bit of my journey in geoscience with you all today, along with the other panelists. It's been really good to hear their journeys as well. I think the main flavor, hopefully you've got from all of our presentations, is that most of the time we enjoy our jobs. There's a lot of people in the world that don't necessarily enjoy their jobs day to day, which is a real shame. But I think generally speaking, like, even though there's some tough days sometimes, but yeah, we really enjoy what we do. I love that we get to see the world as well, whether that's physically traveling to places, or more typically, it can be digitally. We get to see things on our screens working remotely. And then most importantly, I think we get an opportunity to impact our world for good and make a difference as we look to try and save our planet from things like global warming and all the things associated with that through engineering and research and innovation as well. So a bit about my journey, if I can change this. This is an old photo of me at work from my early career. So the main difference with my presentation is that I'm a marine geophysicist and a principal marine geophysicist with a company called Atkins. And we're a consultancy in engineering. But yeah, my expertise is in marine. So 70% of the world is covered in water. And we're looking at ways to utilize the offshore space for things like offshore wind. But yeah, as some have touched on already, oil and gas is a huge part of that. So my journey took me to university. I studied geophysical sciences at Southampton. They've got the School of Ocean and Earth Sciences there. It's part of the National Oceanographic Centre. But before that, I studied geology, maths and physics in Taunton at my sixth form college. Again, had the opportunity to do geology. So how did I get there? Well, before university, geology for me was, I suppose, incorporated in things like places like Lyme Regis, where I used to visit, being from the West Country, discovering fossils and learning about Mary Anning, who was a woman who, you know, last century or 2 centuries ago, kind of innovated our early geology by trying to understand where these fossils had come from and what they were, and really launched geology as we know it. And as with some of the other panelists, I like geography, but human geography strangely didn't interest me. I was fascinated by the rocks and landscapes and physical geography. So that really, in my early stage, I didn't really know what my career path was. I think that's okay. I just sort of went through the motions. So from GCSE, I went to go on to do A-levels, and for not liking human geography, I chose geology, and I stuck with maths and physics because I was interested. I was relatively good at them, but I just wanted to keep that more challenging sort of academic science as well. But really, I was sort of, where do I go from here? And it led perfectly into geophysics. So I like to think geophysics is 10 letters in the word, and 30% is geo, i.e. Earth, and then 70% is physics. So in geophysics, we actually use physics and maths to investigate the Earth, and whether that's in a marine or on land. There's various not what we call non-intrusive methods to investigate the Earth. So my early career took me in marine survey. You saw that picture of me on the boat. That was with a company called EMU, which is now part of a larger company called Fugro. And they specialize in marine survey, hydrographic, geophysical, and geotechnical. And typically we've got a boat, as shown by that cartoon, with various pieces of survey equipment measuring water depths, measuring the type of sediment on the seabed, and then looking underneath the seabed as well, using seismic energy. And what do we use that for? Well, various industries, but certainly offshore wind development. Associated with that, we've got cable and pipeline routing. So all those aspects, the engineering involved in those, we need geophysical surveys. These are some data examples as well from marine aggregates off the Isle of Wight. Some ancient river channels left sand and gravel on the seabed, and those sediments are now dredged for beach replenishment at Bournemouth and other beaches on the south coast, or they're extracted for making concrete in building and other purposes. And then offshore wind. So a lot of the UK, around the UK now, we've got a lot of offshore wind developments, and these are some sub-bottom profiler or seismic images from offshore Scotland, and you can see ancient river systems, ancient glacial landscapes through the seismic data that we collect. So that's all part of the process. And then something that's often very exciting for the people on board the boats, to see shipwrecks that accidents that have happened at sea or from wartime. Some really exciting images that we get to see. Each wreck has its own story, but these are from side scan sonar, which uses sonar to image the seabed, mostly for sediment mapping, but also archaeology. So my career took me into oil and gas, and I went into seismic processing and imaging with a company called TGS initially, and then lived in Australia for a while as well, and worked for a company called Down Under Geosolutions, which is also in the UK and the US. But initially, we start off with this type of data on the left, which is sound recordings as the sound travels through the earth. And then we process it into these images of the subsurface that then the geologists use to map out possible, well, it was for hydrocarbon exploration for petroleum, but nowadays we're trying to sort of look more for options for carbon capture and storage, or underground storage of things like green hydrogen, and also other methods, and also to bring the technology from oil and gas exploration to more sort of green engineering. So my current role, I've been with Atkins since January this year, and as a principal marine geophysicist, we are consulting for offshore wind developments mostly, but other developments as well. I have done a bit of on the nuclear side with some of those EDF projects that Gemma was talking about, but these are some nice sub-bottom profiler examples from various wind farms that we've worked on. So using that geological knowledge to interpret the geophysical data. So just some sort of tips. I think others have touched on these already. Industrial placements, work experience, and research. If you do get opportunities to do these, then certainly encourage you to do that. I didn't do an MSc or a PhD, but certainly could have helped on my journey. And it does help many as well to learn where to specialize. And certainly, yeah, you've joined the Geological Society today for this call, so I certainly encourage you to maintain that link and with other societies. Certainly encourage you to be involved in charitable causes and volunteering. But I just wanted to touch on the fact that industry over the years has really come along a long way, and I feel that opportunities now are much better than they were in the past, and just you can do it. I encourage you, if you're passionate about something, we're certainly here to support you, and I know Atkins and many other companies are doing what they can to try and improve opportunities for people. So make the most of those, and dream big. Encouragement. So yeah, it's just my details on LinkedIn. Not sure what the future holds exactly. I think there's a lot of opportunities out there, whether it's a technical, more sort of academic, or potentially managerial. There's a lot of options out there for me and for everyone else in geoscience. So yeah, wish you the best on your journey.
Thank you, Ed. That was fantastic. And I think you're one of the few people here that actually have a geology A-level. So next we will kind of discuss how you kind of navigate applying for university and getting onto a course. So I'll just share my screen, one moment. Right, so you should be able to see it in 1 minute. Everyone see that?
Yeah.
Geology calls for a wide spectrum of other sciences in order to build up an accurate kind of picture of the conditions that have existed on Earth. So I think all of you had a combination of physics, chemistry, biology, maths, and geology as A-level subjects, and a couple of geography as well, which is helpful. Other things that universities love, extracurricular activities, volunteering, sports, music, and just lots of enthusiasm. So that's always something to bear in mind when writing personal statements and attending university interviews. Choosing your degree. So there's a lot you can kind of research to support this, but there are around about 40 UK universities that offer degrees in geology, geoscience, earth science. I know, Malika, I think you said that you have a degree in earth geoscience, was that correct?
Yeah, so I did environmental geoscience at Cardiff. Yeah, they have like an earth and ocean science department.
Yeah, great. So there are kind of different versions of a geology degree or geoscience degree. So it's kind of worth looking at them very carefully and seeing kind of what appeals to you the most. An undergraduate degree takes 4 years in Scotland or 3 to 4 years in the UK. So they're often written as BSc honours. Your degree will be made up of lectures and practical sessions, so lab work, microscope work, mapping techniques, field trips, and then later on there'll be opportunities for independent research and mapping projects. These 4-year undergraduate and integrated master's degrees are super. And I think, Malika, you mentioned some flexibility in yours. So you were on an integrated master's degree, but then you dropped the master's.
Yeah, so I first joined as a BSc. After the first year, you needed to get a minimum of a 2-1, so 60% overall. Then you could go into the master's course, the integrated master's. So then I was put onto that. And then after speaking to people, I decided didn't really want to do that anymore. So I went back and forth quite a lot. So that's fine. Yeah, so you don't have to make a decision like early on, and that's what you're going to be kept on the whole time.
I would just like to add that the difference, the reason I went for an undergraduate or an integrated master's degree, so 4 years as my undergraduate, was because it's actually cheaper than doing a bachelor's and then a master's separately. So I was actually, I was sponsored from when I did my second master's and by my company, by Atkins. So that really helped with the finances, but I couldn't afford to do that as an undergraduate and then doing a separate master's. So it's if you know that's something you're really interested in, then there's no harm doing the undergraduate, the integrated one.
Yeah, I think on the similar lines, at least at Imperial, we have started some new courses, which are kind of a lot of people highlighted here the importance of computing. So they have started new courses with MSci in computational geology, for example. And also, if you are more inclined towards doing planetary, there is Imperial also does an MSci in Earth and planetary sciences, which is kind of an interface between what you would do in geology and what you would do in planetary sciences. So there's really quite a wide mix of degrees that you can do with geology, depending on if you want to get started early, if you identify something that aligns well with your interests.
Yeah, sorry, everyone. My internet cut out.
I just add as well that you don't have to do a geology A-level. So I didn't do a geology A-level. I don't know. There's not many schools that do geology A-levels or geology GCSEs. So
yeah,
just because you haven't done it,
Yeah.
just because you haven't got it doesn't mean that you can't go on to do it at university. Look at the modules and see what interests you. So the modules that make up the course, I was fascinated by, and that's why I went for that.
All right, Thank you, everyone. So next, I'd like to hear kind of all what you most enjoy about your role. So I'll start with Ed this time. I'll pick on you first since you went last. What do you most enjoy?
Well, I think the answer for me is definitely being able to see things that no one's ever seen before. I mean, the Earth is an incredible creation if you believe it's been created, or whether it just exists. Like, it's an amazing planet, and I'm sure Kartik would say the same about other planets as well. We get to see things that no one's ever seen before, whether it's underwater, under the seabed, or underground. I just think, wow, it's a real privilege to be able to get to see that sort of stuff. Hope that helps.
Kartik, how about you?
I think being out in the field is probably the most enjoyable part of my role. But in just to add to Ed's point, I guess it's I think it's really cool that you get to see you get to see unique things and kind of appreciate like how complex either Earth or even other planetary bodies are, and then actually see how similar the other planetary bodies are to Earth, or how different they are. And essentially, I think it's really cool thing about geology in the sense that you get to apply all the different sciences. You can apply principles of physics, you can apply principles of chemistry, and it's kind of like geology is kind of like that large umbrella where you can draw on different sciences to kind of understand what's happening around you. So I think that's actually the most amazing part about geology, is that you get to dabble into different areas of sciences.
Absolutely. I'm going to ask a slightly different question to Katie. What kind of surprised you most about your role and that you enjoy within your role? So what was kind of the biggest surprise?
I think just the sheer variety of stuff that I have got to work on in terms of like different program content. I think starting out, coming in from a geology degree, I didn't really know what sort of programs I would end up working on. And so actually that kind of comes into like what do you most enjoy about your role, though? It is that variety and the sort of the different people that I get to speak to. It's almost actually a little bit what Ed was saying about that privilege that, I'll be working on like a medicine program for like 3 or 4 months, because it's all short-term contracts in TV, but you're going to be getting to speaking to like world leaders in like whatever topic it is. And then suddenly you'll be moving to something very different 3 months later, like a completely different topic, and a whole new set of people. And so I think like having that variety is probably something that I didn't expect to start with. Like maybe I thought I was going to be like pigeonholed into just science. But for me, being able to kind of branch out into different topics has been pretty amazing, actually. It is that thing about really enjoying your job, and I really do enjoy my job.
Gemma, how about you? Your career has obviously changed a little bit. What would you say has been the biggest surprise for you while studying geoscience?
Okay, so what I love about my career is the variety, and just the fact that it just crosses over so many areas. And when you're working, for example, when I was working at Atkins, I was working on roads and networks. So I was looking at road construction, tunnels, but then I was also working on nuclear power stations, and it's just such a variety. But I'd say my advice is as well that just because so at university, I actually took an engineering geology module and almost failed it. So and I still went into engineering geology as a career. So don't let that get you down. Just because you're not necessarily get top marks at university, like doesn't mean that you're not going to be good at it actually when you go into a career in it. And also when I did my part-time geotechnical engineering masters, there were 3 of us completing some coursework for engineering geology module, and all 3 of us were from engineering geology careers. We were all employed in engineering geology, and we were probably one of the only groups that almost failed that module too. So I have no idea what it was, but I just say keep going. Just because you're not necessarily the best at something doesn't mean that you won't be. Just do what you enjoy, and go with that. And you'll always find something in geoscience with in the areas that you'll enjoy.
Thank you, Gemma. I mean, kind of going back to an earlier conversation, I think most people did say that their perception of geology at school was just rocks, and we can all agree that there's so many different paths that you can take. Malika, you've kind of gone more into the environmental specialism side of geoscience, and obviously there's so much to talk about in that area. What do you kind of find drives you the most within your role?
Yeah, so interestingly, so environmental geoscience was half geography and environment and half geology. I actually found out that I wasn't a fan of the mapping part of geology, which was very heavy. So I decided environment was probably more suited to me. But there's different ways of kind of doing similar roles. So like hydrology is so important in knowing like the different permeabilities of rocks. So there's different like aspects of geology within, so you don't have to just look at like a specimen and be like, right, that's what it is. You can use a range of different ways of figuring things out. And I think that's one of the most enjoyable aspects of my job, is that there's more than one way to tackling a problem and solving loads of problems. There's constantly barriers that come up, but finding a solution is really satisfying. So that's probably one of my most enjoyable parts of the job, problem solving.
Thanks, Malika. There's a couple of questions in the Q&A box. Obviously, we'd welcome more questions. I can see that some of the attendees have typed answers regarding the work placement, but there's one here that I think is probably more for Kartik. Is it possible to become an astronaut by studying physical geography? That's quite a big question.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting question. So I'll go on this from the perspective of geology. So simple answer is absolutely yes, you can become an astronaut after a geology degree. In fact, there is a famous astronaut by the name of Jessica Watkins. She's on she's on the short list of astronauts that are, I think, that are due to go sometime into space. If I'm not 100% correct, don't quote me on that. But yeah, she did a degree in geology, and she's on the NASA astronaut program. So most of these space missions have generally 2 different objectives. One objective is obviously to do science, and the other one is to do a demonstration for technology, or to demonstrate that you're able to put human beings on another planet. So on the tech demonstration side, most of the times it's actually pilots or engineers who actually go for that. But for example, in case of lunar missions of Apollo, there were, I think, 12 astronauts that went, out of which 11 were these military pilots, but one of them was actually a geologist. So that was the only scientist that ever went to moon. So it's changing now as we are advancing. The next objective is on studying other planetary bodies is always going to be science, and in science, mostly geosciences. So over time, you will have more and more geoscientists who are turning into astronauts compared to less of military people. At least I hope that will happen. But yes, it is absolutely possible. And hopefully one of the young students from the audience here is part of the group of human exploration of Mars.
Super, that's great. I mean, it's such a fascinating area to go in. Last year, the Society did a year of space, and we have some fantastic public lectures that you can watch on our YouTube channel. And if you've got a spare hour in the day, I'd highly recommend watching. They're absolutely great. And I think some of them are by your colleagues, Kartik. So definitely worth a watch.
Yeah. And I would just quickly add on to that. When you actually go and watch these lectures, you will kind of see the different varieties, because I remember participating in that event, and really there are people from very, very different backgrounds who are actually working in the space sector. Even people, I think majority of us on the panel probably had maths, but even if you have biology, there is an exciting field of astrobiology where people are trying to study how biomarkers are preserved in rock records. So yeah, just to add to Gemma's point earlier, I mean, you can have any choices with your company.
So finally, there's kind of a question of what would you recommend to others looking to take a similar career path? I think we've already covered this question in parts, but there are so many kind of great organizations that I think deserve a shout out. So on this slide, you can see organizations like BGS, the Access Project, IOM3, the Society's Early Career Network, which is absolutely fantastic. They're a great bunch. There's also STEM Learning, Women in Mining, Diversity in Geoscience UK, and also we've got GEON, that's a network that the Society is kind of in the process of launching, and the Careers and Enterprise Company, and NERC, the Natural Environment Research Council, and of course NASA. So does anyone want to kind of talk through any of these organizations and give a shout out? If I've covered it, that's great, but they're all kind of worth looking at, and if you have any questions, do kind of post them in the chat regarding any of these. Right, I can see a couple of questions have come through. So there's one saying, I graduated in 2020 with a BSc in geology with a long-term plan of going down a teaching career path, but I've decided to backtrack and go down the geoscience route. Any advice for applying for jobs? Are graduate schemes my best method, as I don't have any work experience in this industry? We actually have a CV and interview skills session tomorrow that I'd recommend you logging onto, but in the meantime, do the panel have kind of any insights on this? Who shall I pick on? Ed.
I had my eyes on the other question actually, but I could, yeah, I think graduate schemes might be your best bet. Yeah, I'm not sure otherwise.
Yeah, probably Gemma would probably be best person for this.
Okay, I just wanted to say that graduate schemes are brilliant, but they're very competitive. So I never went on a graduate scheme. None of the jobs I've ever applied for, none of my jobs that I've ever had have been advertised. So I think my advice would be that if you find something that you like, or a company that really interests you, or an area of geoscience, research it, look at the companies that you could work for potentially, and just contact them, apply to them. A lot of the time they do need geoscientists, they're just not actively looking for them. So yeah, just get your CV out there, and yeah, they might not be. So when I applied for my job at Atkins, they were looking for a senior geotechnical engineer. I was only a graduate geotechnical engineer, but I applied anyway, and not for the senior role obviously, but asking if you had any more junior placements, and they did, and that's how I got my role. So yeah, the internships are brilliant, and the graduate schemes are brilliant, but that's not the only way to apply.
Kartik, you had some thoughts as well, I think.
Yeah, I mean, little different from Gemma, because I worked 1 year in industry, and I entered through the graduate scheme. Yeah, but I do agree that it's a bit tough, and being in that system, I know that there are a lot of times when they are not actively looking for a geologist, but there might be an opening. So yes, I would also add to Gemma's point that yes, you should actually email and check with the HR.
Yeah, I just like to add, since I'm already on a graduate scheme, they are really competitive, but that's probably why I recommend a year in industry, just because that kind of bypasses you through it to get you onto the graduate scheme. That's quite an easier way of getting through. You would still have to do an interview to get the placement, but it is a lot less competitive. So I definitely recommend that for long term if you want a job afterwards.
Super, thank you. There's another question, a couple of questions that are a bit similar. So some universities only offer earth science and not geoscience. Would you say that they lead to the same career options? Who has their hand up? Does anyone want to jump in with that?
I think it mainly depends on the modules. A lot of degrees are very similar with just different names. So I think it depends on the modules that you're actually doing. And there are ones where you can kind of cater your degree because there are optional modules later on. So if you think you want to go down a certain route, you can choose the modules that will help you go down that route.
Yeah, I think in my understanding, the contrast between the earth science and geology degree would be going out into the field and doing an independent mapping gets you a geology degree. I think that component of the degree, of the geology degree, is really important. Not sure about the industry. I don't think it changes a lot in terms of research later on, because people like interdisciplinary and collaborative teams in research, and I'm sure it's the same in industry as well.
I think I'd also say to look at the university's master's courses. I think most universities will have a slight slant towards a specialism. So like maybe Ed being at Southampton having that sort of oceanography, geophysics side, whereas like with Leeds, their master's is more like structural geology. So people do tend to go into oil and gas from there. So even though the undergrad titles might vary slightly different, it's worth looking at what they do as a master's, even if you're not even sure if you're going to do a master's, just to see how that university might slant its course.
No, that's really helpful. I agree that it's so worth taking some time to either look through the modules individually. The universities should list them on their website. If not, email and ask, get in touch with the university and ask for the specific information, because it's a big decision, and you want to make sure that you're on the right course. There's a question at the bottom. It says, I'm an Asian student and have completed my master's in applied geology this year. I'm looking forward to join a PhD position in the EU. Could you please provide me with some insight in the application process for international students in the EU? This is quite a difficult question because I know a lot of the legislation has recently changed, but I believe we do have some information on the Society's website. So there is a resource. So if you post your email address in the chat box, I'll be able to send you some useful links after the session. Does anyone have any advice on that, on this call though?
I think it's a very broad question
It is.
for a PhD, because there are a lot of different things you can do with that. A lot of times you would have PhD positions that would be advertised. You could apply for them, or I would also recommend like reaching out to prospective supervisors that you want to work with. Really get all the information you can, not just about the science that you're going to do, but also the group and the people that you're going to be working with, because PhD would be a long duration effort, and you want to work in an environment that is supportive, helpful, and somewhere that you would really like to enjoy. And again, be very when you develop your own questions and you're contacting a prospective supervisor, try and think about what your passion would be, and try and imagine that if you are okay working for 4 or 5 years on that same research area or research problem consistently. Yeah, but there are a lot of advice for the PhD perspective. I'm happy to take questions later on offline. You can contact me on email or on Twitter.
Thank you. That's really helpful. So we're out of time, I'm afraid. We've gone a couple of minutes over, but there's been some great discussion with you all today. So I'd like to thank the volunteers for this session. So thank you very much for taking time out when you're all so busy. So tomorrow we'll be back at 12:15. We've got sessions on energy, mineral exploration, quarrying and mining commodities. In the afternoon, we've got a CV writing and interview skills session that I just mentioned. We also have planetary and remote sensing that will be fascinating. And at the end of the day, we have an introduction into chartership and transferable skills, because obviously chartership is a kind of slightly confusing but essential process for some kind of careers within geoscience. So I'm sure you'll all want to hear about that. I'll draw it to a close now, but thank you all very much for coming along today, and I hope to see you back tomorrow. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, Becky, for organizing this.
Thank you.
Becky.
Thanks so much.
Thanks,
Good luck,
everyone.
everybody.